Thank you very much, guys, again for showing up. So we're going to get into the essentials of news photography. This is not really meant to be too intense on the technical side. This is more of a crash course. I'd like to do more stuff in the future where we get a little bit more technical. But I think the most important thing we can do to start with is to try and tell the difference between strong photos and weak photos. So this is going to be kind of a crash course on how to tell the difference, so that if you're out in the field and even if you don't know like what the settings are supposed to be on your camera or anything like that, you can at least try your best to get a strong photo, despite maybe not having the technical knowledge. Like I said, we'll move into the technical stuff a little bit further down the road. So the first thing I want to say, and I know Sarah and I kind of had a back and forth on this, so I'm going to give my perspective, and then if Sarah, you want to give your perspective, given your own journey as a photographer, please go ahead. I call it taking a photo for a reason. You are actually taking a moment, the identities, the actions, and all of that that are happening within that moment when you're taking photos in the field. And so when you're taking something, for me as a photographer, it's important to give something back. And the way that I do that is by making sure I'm accurately captioning my photos. You're preserving the voice, the actions, that moment in history, and those people participating in it. And that's kind of the giving back for the photo that you're taking. And that means that you are talking to the people you're photographing. It means that you are getting to know them and why they're there and what they're doing. It's not a matter of trying to look back at the whole event when you're back in the comfort of your own chair at your computer and looking at the photo and kind of trying to piece together a caption. I know sometimes, rarely, but sometimes we have to do that. But the goal is that we're getting all of that information in the field from the people who we took the photo of. And then there's a common thing that happens when you're kind of starting out in photography, especially if you're like an aspirational photojournalist and it's snapshotting. And I saw this actually back in June during the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests. Actually, this is where I first met Sarah without knowing Sarah. There was a die-in and she was working for Sac City. And while I was there getting photos, because I was talking to Tanya Fajon and asking her if I could take photos and give them to her so she could use them for her own social media if she ever wanted to. But while I was there, I would see these people who were kind of capitalizing on the moment to just get interesting photos, and they would just kind of like lift their camera up and take a photo and then move on. And that's a horrible practice. We shouldn't be doing it. That's snapshotting. So we need to avoid that. So moving from that, there's some core principles when it comes to editing in photojournalism. I think it should be pretty well understood that you do not heavily alter the photos in any way, such as removing or adding objects or blemishes or anything like that. So if there's a pole in the back of somebody's head, I know Sarah's mentioned this with video editing and photo editing, you do not remove that pole, even if it might not look good in the photo. If somebody has acne, I'm sorry to say, but you don't get to clean that up. If somebody's got oily skin, again, you don't get to clean that up. That is how the photo was shot. And it's always a reminder that we can always do better in photography. If we're getting photos that we wish we could alter, it's just we want to make sure we're looking to avoid that in the next photo we take. And so another thing, unfortunately, Sarah, I did not correct this, but I meant to. We never heavily alter the colors or contrast of an image. We do not change the contrast. We do, like I know Sarah has said, and please, when I'm done with this, I want to get your perspective as well, Sarah. You don't touch contrast. You don't touch saturation. You try and get the photo as you saw it in your eye. And your eye is not going to over contrast or oversaturate an image. Yeah, Sarah, please, if there's anything that I missed, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, like you said, you never, ever, ever, ever touch your contrast. You never touch your saturation. If you're trying to do a black and white and you want to make the blacks a little bit blacker, oh well, like you can't touch it. That's the one thing with photojournalism. To me, it makes you a better photographer. Even if you decide photojournalism isn't for you, it makes you a better photographer because you have to get it right in camera. You can't fix it in post. The only thing you can fix in post are like color corrections. Like in a basketball gym, there's always a yellow light. You can make it, you make it to what your eye saw. So I can add a little bit of blue to make it look like what I saw, not this yellow photo. I can't make a sunny day look sunnier. That's unethical. If it is too dark, you can pull the exposure a little bit, but again, you can't like heavily alter. If you screw up in camera, you screwed up like that. You can't fix it. So photojournalism, you have to get it right in camera.
Mm-hmm. And I think too that like this is more when you're further along in like your photography career or what you understand about photography, but you'll notice that some manufacturers make sensors on their cameras that might be tinted a little bit more green or a little bit more purple. I know with Sony, and the same is true with Nikon because Nikon uses Sony sensors, they tend to be a little bit more on the green side. So you can correct for that. Canon is almost perfect. So the colors you get out of a Canon camera, usually you don't have to touch them up too much. It should be fine. So that's kind of just the core principles I want to get out of the way, because I think if you're going into photography, you need to know that you have a relationship with the people you're photographing, and that they're giving you a moment and you need to give them something back, which in my opinion is a voice. And that happens through the caption. And then on top of it, when you're getting your photos, you need to be true to what everything looked like when you were there, because you're standing in the place of people who cannot be there and want to know what happened. So if you're altering an image in any significant way, you're giving them a skewed idea of what happened and how it looked. So moving on from that, we use a few different kinds of photography in photojournalism. That can be portraiture, environmental photos, sports, which Sarah will cover because she's got a lot more experience with it, and architecture photography. That tends to be like file photos and stuff like that. So like I said, we're going to go over the strong versus the weak, what's a powerful image versus a not so powerful image, and then how these different types of photography apply to different sections. In the end, you're probably going to use all of these kinds of photography, all these forms of photography in all the sections, but what I've experienced, some are more important for some sections than others. So if you're working in a certain section, you may want to focus your sights on one of these kinds of photography I'm talking about to begin with. So we're going to start with portraiture. So we use it for all sections. It tends to pop up more or less in A&E News and Opinion. And the core principles are always focus on the eye. So if you have the ability to, let's say you have a mirrorless camera, you can always zoom in and make sure your focus is sharp on the eye. This becomes a little bit more difficult with DSLR cameras with the mirror that flips up in your camera, but you can still just get an approximation for being focused on the face. So if you can't focus on the eye, focus on the face. And because that's going to matter. When you're looking at a portrait, you're looking at their eyes, you're looking at their nose, you're looking at their mouth. And in my opinion, I think, and this is what I've seen mainly in portraits, those eyes tend to be on the upper third of the image. If they're too low, there's too much space above them, it doesn't look good. And if it's too high, you're close to cutting off their head, and that doesn't look good either. And having their eyes on the upper third of the image applies both the landscape and a portrait. One thing I see that a lot of beginner photographers do, and I've done this before, sometimes I still do it when I'm not focusing when taking an image, is that you'll cut off the fingers, the hands, the toes, the feet, parts of a person that are almost in frame, but just outside of it, you'll cut them off, and it just it doesn't look good. As a rule of thumb in portrait photography, you're trying to keep, anything that's close to being off frame, either fully out of frame or within frame. So like for her, obviously her hands and her feet aren't going to be in frame because I'm focusing more on her face. But let's say if we move to the next image, if I cut off this woman's hands or maybe just her fingers, it wouldn't be as strong of an image. It would look like I was kind of taking a photo lazily. So this is what I would consider strong portraiture. The landscape photos tend to be better when you're talking about an image that's going to be featured on the website. Having a vertical photo is harder. I mean, I've talked with Chris about this. He prefers having landscape photos as opposed to featured. Like I said, the hands are in frame. The rule of thirds is being utilized. You have interesting points where her face is in one corner, and you've got the sign that says "Stingers Up" over here, and it's all kind of moving towards the center of the image. The only thing that I might have done a little bit different is maybe raise the frame just a hair more so that I wasn't clipping off this camera. So see, no matter what, I still have a possibility of changing this image to make it a little bit stronger. This is what I would consider weak portraiture. So the hands are cut off, her hand is right there, and that should have been in frame, or I should have focused tighter on her so that we didn't have to worry about her hands being in frame. There's not enough environmental context. You don't know exactly where this is. Obviously, it's in California because you see wide open walls, but you don't know which, well, I guess it says Sacramento, but still, you shouldn't be relying upon a sign for, or text in an image. That shouldn't heavily depend, or shouldn't be heavily informative to where the image is or what's going on. I think having environmental context is more important than having words, because you're looking at a photo for the environment, not to read more.
Patrick, can I add something right there?
Yeah.
One thing, like feature photos are not always my strongest. I'm a very straightforward shooter, and that's what he's talking about right here. Feature type photos tell the story without having to read the caption. That makes a good feature. If I can tell what's going on by looking at the photo and I don't need to read the caption, you have a good photo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can write a caption all day, but you need to tell it with your photo. So make sure you need to be intentional with what you put into your photo so it tells a story. And what story are you telling?
So like for this, she has a mural in the background that she painted. So why am I focusing on her specifically in the sign when I could be focusing on putting her in front of that mural far enough away so that the mural is smaller in frame, and then I can take the image of both the mural and her. I think that would be a stronger photo than just trying to get a photo of her next to her sign. So actually, quickly, I'm going to check the chat. I'm noticing we've got stuff going on.
All this stuff in chat.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. So for environmental photos, we use them again for all sections, like I said, but environmental photos tend to show up more in A&E and news. Opinion is kind of, and I know, I'm sure Mercy's in here, or Cameron, I don't know, but so that they could attest to this. But I personally found that I'm using environmental photos more for arts and entertainment and news. Core principles, wide angles. I actually got on this class by being referred by the multimedia editor over at Capital Public Radio, and one critique he had of my own portfolio is I was always getting tight shots. He's like, you need to make it wide and you need to get up close. Getting up close is difficult right now because of COVID-19, so it's within reason. So like for the top image here, I stayed about 6 feet away from the people I was photographing. And then it's this, as Sarah said earlier, it's your chance to tell a story. You're using everything within an image. I see these kind of as paintings. You're trying to tell a story through everything within the image, and there's symbolism between all the things that are happening. So so really try and tell a story with these images if you're taking environmental photos. What is significant to you? What is interesting? What catches your eye? What do you think will catch other people's eyes? And what do you think will be interesting to other people? And then one thing I notice sometimes that is difficult for me when I'm looking at photos or photos I've taken in the past, is that people will sometimes get photos of the backs of people's heads, or I have done that. And it's not, you need to get faces. Faces show emotion, as you can see in the photo in the lower right. And emotion is key to explaining like the tone of an image. So I would consider this a relatively strong environmental photo. This was around the election. And I think I could have framed it better. See, I'm going to critique my own photos here. That bag, the ballot bag, I probably could have gotten more of that in frame. But the main thing that you're seeing here is that there's movement in the image. You can tell that he's putting his ballot in. You can see the faces of the two other people, himself included, so that you're not looking at the backs of anybody's head. And they're both looking at him putting it in the ballot box. So there's a sense of direction as to where like the focus is kind of centered in on that ballot going in the ballot box. And then let's see. You can kind of tell a story. I didn't have to explain to you that this was like on election day. You probably could have assumed it. So I would say this is a strong environmental photo. To me, I would see this as a weak environmental photo. This is actually specifically a photo that was published in our election coverage that I took that Stu criticized for us having in there. There is no context for it. I mean, the only context you see is that it's a Trump sign against Democrats. And it relies upon the text within the image, just as I said earlier. It's relying upon the text to tell you what's going on. You don't know where this photo was taken. We don't know who is holding the sign. We don't have their name. We don't have their story. This is a snapshot. Anybody could have taken this photo and then walked away. And so this is an extremely weak photo for that reason. So then we get into architecture. Again, these are photos that you can have a lot more time to take. It's not as high pressure. This is just stuff that we'll use whenever something happens at one of the buildings or is in reference to one of the buildings, whether it be funding or an event or whatever. I know Mercy and Cameron want file photos of buildings around campus. So with regards to this, wide angle shots to me are great. I think getting a tight shot of a building, I don't know how you would do it exactly. So I always say wide is best. And then you don't want to over edit the photos. I know like if you're looking at Zillow or you're looking at like all these real estate photography sites, they'll have photos where everything's super bright or super contrasty, and you really want to stay away from that. The goal is just to get the most realistic image you can. With regards to some of these buildings are not going to be able to be wholly within your frame, so because they're just so big and you can't get a lens wide enough to get a photo of them, given how narrow some of our spaces between buildings can be. So in that respect, I would look for the most significant parts of a building and focus on keeping that in frame. And you'll see an example in a moment what I mean by that. And then one thing I also want to cover before I move on, get a sense of direction for the eye to travel. Like for here, I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, this is kind of an interesting angle. It gives you perspective. It's pinching off at this point, so it's showing a sense of direction. Your eye is going to kind of naturally flow from left to right or from right to left on that image. And the same is true with this photo of the element. You're going to look at the sign and then you're going to look at the background. So your eye is traveling from left to right. So with this photo, the union, your eye is going to travel from right to left, I think, where you're looking at the union sign and then you're kind of looking over at this piece right here. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you see it differently, and that's fine. But the goal is that you got this wide angle shot, you kept the sign within frame, you're not over editing it. This is pretty close to what came out of camera. I think I had to touch up the shadows a little bit because it was a little too dark in this area. But for the most part, this is what I got in my camera. I actually, one thing, and Sarah, you can correct me if you think this is wrong, I actually kept in the vignetting that naturally comes on my ultra wide lens. You have an option to turn that off. I just decided to keep it in because it darkened the edges naturally with the camera lens and it put the emphasis on the University Union sign. Yeah, so I'd say this is a strong architectural photo.
Vignetting is, you can do very minimal. If I can tell that there's vignetting, it shouldn't be like that.
Okay.
Because you can always add to the image, but I stay away from it just because I get nervous with, I don't want to tell that line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But a very minimal where you can't tell that it was done is okay.
So I should say this isn't added vignetting. This is vignetting that's natural to the camera lens. So I just chose not to take it out.
Oh, well, yeah, if your camera does it, then it's fine. But like doing it in post, you want to stay away from that.
Yeah, and you'll notice with wide angle lenses, you'll get vignetting. It's just because the light that's coming in from the edges of a lens is lesser than the light that's coming in directly in front of it. So you're naturally going to get less light in through the edges, and it's going to show up darker. So I would consider this, as you saw, I had a photo earlier of the science building. This is another photo of the science building I took the same day, and it was the weakest photo in my camera roll. That reason being that it's kind of compressed. There's not, it looks awkward to me. I don't know, is the emphasis supposed to be on the building? Is it supposed to be on the dome? Is it supposed to be on the lawn? There's no specific emphasis in the photo. So to me, I would consider this a weak photo. There's some angling here, but it just looks kind of skewed. Whereas the angling in the previous photo, it was going down at the same angle and it was going up at the same angle. Whereas in this photo, it's kind of just flat and then going down. That's a little too technical, but the long and the short of it is I've compressed the building when in the previous photo, I kind of accentuated one side of it. And so I would say stay away from this kind of photography if you could. Try and get an interesting angle. And now, given that I've gone through that, I'm going to, before we move on to critiquing other images, because I want you guys to get a good eye for what weak and strong photography is, and I want you to take your stab at determining whether or not these photos are weak or strong. I just want to see if you guys have any questions.
Should we put a thumbs up or thumbs down if we think it's good or bad?
Yeah, or you're more than, I mean, I should have thought about this, how we were going to do this. You're more than welcome to just speak up in chat too, because I'd love to hear why you think the images are weak or why they're strong. And I'll be keeping an eye on the comment section as well, just to make sure. So let's get to it. I mean, if you want to put a thumbs up, thumbs down, that's fine, but I really would like to hear your feedback as well. So, would you consider this photo weak or strong? All right, Maddie says weak. Tara says weak. There we go, weak. It is, in my opinion, a weak photo. I agree with you guys. There's several reasons why this is weak, and I'd love to know if any of you're already saying can't see your face. That's very true. You can see the hands, which is also good. But I'd say the face is a very important thing. We have a harder time identifying her, especially because she's wearing a face mask. Rule of thirds, awesome. Yeah, mainly see the back of her head, too much in the background instead of the foreground. It is a very busy image, that is true. And what's interesting, actually, now that I'm looking at it, so her face is getting cut off. So I've got an image where this arm is cutting off this woman's face, and then we can barely see her face. So in a sense, there's almost no faces in this image. I mean, maybe hers if you look right there, but she's so far right of frame that it's not even worth mentioning her. So yeah, you guys did great on that. I would consider this a weak photo. And yes, I would agree. It needs to be angled a little bit differently. This was definitely taken almost as if I was standing at her height. And I think images look better if you're slightly below people or slightly above them. And that's a whole other thing, whether or not you should be looking up at a person or looking down at a person, because that can also influence the mood around an image. But that's for another time. We're just trying to pick good and bad photos here. All right. So would you guys consider this be strong or weak? Okay. People are saying strong, strong. Okay. All right. Like the angle. Thank you, Chrissy. All right. So it looks like the consensus is strong. Yes, you can see the hands. You can see her face. You can see the tool that she's using. I'm an anthropology major actually, so I like to use the term artifacts. The things we leave behind are the things that we use. And I would say that having her artistic artifacts is important. And there is emotion. Yes, thank you, Adeola. And you can also see the work that she produces versus the work that she's also making. If there's any critiques that you do have, even though we're kind of agreeing that this is a strong image, I'm still open to critiquing this image if you think I could have done something better. Because I really want you guys to critically think about images that you're taking, but also see other images you're seeing. Desk in the background is distracting. That's true. I could have waited for a moment where maybe she stepped back a bit in front of that, and then it would have been a little less distracting. I do like that. Thank you for mentioning that. It is pretty busy. Little more space at the top of the picture on the right. That is true. I'm kind of almost cutting this painting off. I would agree. And it is a little sad that I could not get this image. It was a restriction of the lens and also how close she was, or how close she positioned her photos. So I'm totally with you on that. Totally with you on that. Get rid of the negative space in the upper left corner. That's true. No, I appreciate that, Bloom. That's true. There is nothing really up there to look at. So that can be for the image if you're trying to focus on a specific aspect, but if you're trying to kind of give an overall environmental photo, sometimes having too much negative space is bad. And now see, the thing is with getting into this part of the photography, you guys are kind of developing what your style is, what your eyes look for. So you might not all agree. Maybe somebody says, well, I like that negative space. In this case, I saw the negative space is good. But if you don't like it, then that's good. That's your style. So let's look at this image. What do you guys think? Is this weak or strong? Or somewhere in between? It doesn't have to be one or either. Okay, Maddie says weak. Chrissy says somewhere in between. The cropping is bad. All right, all right. And I would agree. The cropping is garbage, in my opinion. These are my photos, so I get to be really harsh on them. So yes, I would say this gentleman's face here should be in frame. That Trump flag should be in frame. This gentleman's face should be in frame. Cutting this guy's hand off should be in frame. If you move to the left a little, you could eliminate negative space, some of the distracting oh, okay, we're going back to the previous image. Thank you. I appreciate your you thinking like that. That's great. Yes, I definitely could have done that. Oh no, you're good. So yeah, I'd say the downside of this is that yes, I have taken a photo that is very tightly cropped. It shouldn't have been. And then yeah, the thing that's cool about this image is you got emotion. I mean, this guy, he's giving you the one finger salute. This gentleman here is expressing whatever he's expressing. You have a whole host of things to look at, a lot of different emotions in one image, which I think is telling of the environment. And you've got people trying to record it, which can be significant in its own right. But I think, as people are saying, it was a little too tightly cropped. And I could have, and unfortunately too, the downside is I'm relying upon text for you to understand where this is. It's the state treasurer's office, which is in front of the Capitol building, and you would not have known that this is in front of the Capitol building had I not had that sign there. So it's contextual in that way, and I'd say this is passable-ish, but I still think I have a personal preference where I do not like to rely upon text to tell me where a photo is taken. Yeah, it's true. It looks like it's kind of a setup. I could see that. All right, so let's move on to the next image. All right, is this strong or weak?
I would say weak just because the lower third, it's just like dirt and there's nobody in that circle, I guess.
I would agree. It is I would say for me, it's weak. I think, I mean, I kind of intended to put this in as a weak photo so you could see some of the pitfalls of the environment. Because the thing is, I'm in a place here where I can't get a good vantage point. if I'm trying to get the whole crowd. I can't get high enough above them. The highest I can get is my own height, and that can restrict you. Now, what I did do, and I don't think I should have included this image, there's a park bench right there. Now, I'm not advising you to stand on park benches, but I did end up getting a better photo from that park bench by standing on it. But yeah, and it's also compressed. All of the information that you need is in the middle third, and I don't like that. It's not evenly distributed enough. And on top of it, I think we're getting dangerously close to cropping out this guy's heel and that woman's map. So I would say super weak photo. Thankfully, it didn't make it into the final cut. It did not get published. All right, is this a strong image or a weak image? Okay, now I like this. I'm hearing people say I think, and I think that's good. The goal is that I was moving from pretty clearly good and pretty clearly bad to more like, well, I don't know now. Is it good? Is it bad? Because I would say this is somewhere in between. In my opinion, it tells a story. I think I just don't know if it tells the strongest story. Yes, you can. Yes, you can see his face. What his job or role is. That's true. And because let's see, I'm seeing all these messages. Sorry, I will try and reply to all of them. So yeah, I think it's okay. I think it's strong. I think it's strong. Strong. I can see his face, hands, art, which yes, and I'd say this is a passable image. It's not. It's probably not the strongest image, but if you come back with this, something that's like this, it'd be publishable. And yes, the table corners are still there. I'm getting a little close, dangerously close. And the same is true with the top of this. I'm getting very close to cutting it off. So I'm taking some risks there with this photo. But yeah, so to the point earlier, it's harder to tell what he's doing. Is he framing images? Is he taking images? Like what is his job? Now, this guy is a photographer. So it'd be easier to tell from other images, maybe with a camera in there or some studio lighting or a backdrop. If I took a photo with him in front of those things, you get a better idea of what this guy does. And let's see, maybe move to the right and a bit less window. Yeah, I could see that actually. That would look a lot better. Yeah, no, you can't tell he's a photographer. There's no camera in frame. There's no studio lighting. There's nothing. He's just editing. Now, if this was paired along with a bunch of other photos that also included those things, this may be a passable photo. But again, you're gonna want to make sure you have those photos where you see him with his equipment or the environment that he works in, that shows the tools he works with. All right, wonderful. Okay, would you consider this a strong or a weak photo? Okay. Okay. All right. And see, this is good. You all have different opinions, and I like that. It's good because it means you're critically thinking about this photo and what it means and if it's good or bad. Yeah, I'd say it's in between. But on the strong side. Okay, cool. So out of context, I'd say this is a relatively okay-ish image in my opinion. Granted, I took it, so I have a bias. But yes, in terms of what's going on, you don't quite know. Now, if I told you that this was at the end of a game, I should have included captions in this actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Because I already talked about captions, so I should have included them. But regardless, this was at the end of a game for women's basketball and they lost it. And I believe it was their open seasoner and they lost it. So so yeah, I mean, with context, this might be a strong image. Without context, maybe not. I would say that the only thing is, for whatever reason, I'm getting some I don't know, what would you call that, Sarah? Are you seeing what I'm seeing where it's like green and yellow and red up in the
Well,
corner?
that the lighting in there's green and maroon and clean lighting in there. So you're gonna get a little bit sometimes of all three
Okay.
in the
Yeah.
models.
So, because I didn't even notice that when I posted it. So, okay, yeah. So there's little things here. I mean, it would have been cool maybe if I stepped a little bit more to the right. I could have pushed that out of frame and then just focused these seats within frame and not had that distracting off on the edge. Yeah, there's emotion in the image, which I would say, in my opinion, is helpful. It's always good when you can get emotion. It connects you to the person in some capacity. But again, yeah, it's not the strongest image. I would agree. How do you get rid of the noise in an image? Sarah,
I
yeah,
was gonna say, I actually go over that in the sports workflow. I did a video on how to pick your photos, caption your photos, what you can do with editing, and I go over that. There is in Camera Raw, there's noise, but if you add too much, it smooths out the skin and it makes it look very, very fake. So you can do a minimal amount. But it's okay to have noise and you can get rid of a little bit. But again, just like anything else with photojournalism, you
yeah.
just can't overdo it. Noise is the higher the ISO, it's pixelated and it doesn't look as crisp, like your lines on the face. Even if you're focused on the face, it won't
Yeah.
look crisp. That's just noise. So like high ISO, like in that gym with a good camera, you can shoot at like 2,500. Sometimes it's like 32 or 4,000. And then you start
And there's
seeing that
noise in this image for sure. I think the problem I had here too is that I still have my shutter speed pretty high. So I added ISO rather than reducing shutter speed to get that image, which was dumb, but I got it, so that's something. Okay, let's yeah. So Blinn, as you're pointing out, it's the fuzzy things, yes. All right, let's move on to the next. Is this a strong or a weak photo? Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Wow. Okay. Because there's no right or wrong answer. So I'll say, I appreciate that you guys see that this is a strong photo. And if I had to give my opinion, I would agree with Maddie. I think it's weak only because I don't know if you guys can see the text. Or Sarah, can they see the text?
No.
Like the text chat? Okay, cool. Sweet. So yeah, just because I'm cutting off the side of this building when I should have gotten that in frame, there's like, if I had stayed back a little bit more, there's like probably 2 more inches worth of building that I could have gotten in frame, so you would have seen the whole thing. That being said, this building is probably the hardest for me to, yeah, the left third is, I think the left third is cool. I just got to do something about the right third of the image. So you can have like part of the image be really awesome, but you want to make sure that it's awesome all the way throughout. And in my opinion, I think the right third is not awesome. So I got to figure out what I need to do with that part of the image. Does that mean I stand back further? Does it mean that I just find a different part of the building to photograph because it's almost impossible to, which ended up being the case. I just went to the opposite side of the building and it was a lot easier to photograph. But yeah, it's a matter of like looking at the whole image and seeing, okay, you know, which parts are good, which parts are bad, which part of the image while I'm looking at it before I take it, which parts could I adjust right now so I don't have to do anything later. All right, so strong or weak? All right. All right. Chrissy Martinez, it's all right. See, that's the attitude I love, because I think that's the attitude I encourage anybody who's doing photojournalism to have, that they just think their photos are all right. Sarah will bring it up. She's had people tell her something to a similar effect with regards to photojournalism. It's all right. Go ahead.
The only way, I mean, the only reason I was really saying that's because to me, that railroad crossing is too distracting for me. Like maybe she
Yep.
could have went in front of it, but I could tell then that would have, you know, cropped out the butterfly. And then also too, just looking at the other corner of the mural, it's missing. But
Yeah.
those are the main things why.
No, this is a good way. Please, I'm not being bothered by these criticisms. I think it's great. I think it's great. So, because these are the things we need to look for when we're taking photos to publish on our website. So yeah, that railroad crossing sign going to be kind of an issue. It's a busy photo as it is, and that sign is just adding to it. I'd have to find a creative way to move her around or move myself around in order to get that sign out of frame while not cutting too much into her own painting. The other thing I probably would have done differently is I would have made the image sharper all the way throughout. So the focus right now is sharp on her, but the focus is not as sharp. It's a little bit softer in the background. And if I had tightened my aperture by going up to like, I don't know, f6, 5, 5.3 or whatever, I might have been able to get a little bit sharper of an image in the background as well, so that the focus is on the both of them rather than just focusing on her. Because when you're looking at her painting, you're looking at a blurrier version of her painting. But yeah, I'd say if somebody submitted this, I'd say, all right, this will work. This will work. We can always try better, but this will work. All right. So what do you guys think of this? Strong or weak? Too busy? Okay. Don't like it? Okay. Strong in between, but towards strong. Okay. That's good. I like hearing the I'm not sure's. It's good. This is good feedback. Thank you guys. I appreciate this because the thing too is that you're bringing up things to me that I don't think about. So you're helping me as well. All right. Too much going on with the sign in front and the yellow poles. I would agree with you. So let's see, lower third still deciding. Yeah. I'd have liked to not have the sign right in front. Yep, I agree. So I've already shown you a decent amount of photos of the science building, and that's because I had the hardest time photographing it. And this was one of the photos. I would say this is a passable photo, but I would not consider it a strong photo. It would do in a pinch to get us by in terms of publishing it, but I think the photo that I showed earlier, it's a smaller image. The one that I took from the opposite side of the building is a stronger image. It's less distracting, and the focus is more on the building, and you're not looking at these yellow poles, because that's another thing too. Color is going to catch the eye before geometry. So if you're looking at a bright color and it's closer to being out of frame, it's going to pull you away from the rest of the image. Walk to the other side of the post. That is a possibility that I did try. The only downside is this is the widest that my lens could go. So if I got any closer, the edges on over here and over here would have been cut out of frame, which is why I decided to say, nope, I'm not going to be getting it from this angle. I actually used the bookstore, and I asked if I could go to the second floor of the bookstore and take a photo from the second floor of the building, and that's how I got the other one. So that's what I would recommend, because it'd be great if I had a super wide angle lens, but I didn't. All right, and then I'm trying to think. Yep, that's it. So thank you guys for all of your feedback. Break out the drone. I do have a drone, Tara, and Sarah. I've asked Sarah, not even asked, I've just said that I want Sarah to train me on how to use it, and I just never follow her up on it. So that's on me. Yeah, so thank you guys for taking a look at that. I will link this slideshow in general and make sure all of channel sees it so that you get a chance to go through it again if you want. But yeah, I hope that this will at least help you see what a good photo versus a bad photo is, so that when you're in the field and you need to get a photo, you can look out for those things.